Day 2 of the Earth Archive Congress. Welcome back, everyone. I've been relegated to the slide bot for the first part of this conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve and share some slides with you. And we're going to kind of summarize what happened yesterday and what's going to happen today.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I think we had a very full day yesterday. And to start today, what we'd like to do is, of course, thank the people who have put together this conference. And so we want to thank the folks at ConnectMe, who have spent a number of months organizing this, reaching out, and really getting everybody involved. So Mark Baronis, Ann Feldman, Alex Baronis, who's been behind the screen, behind the webinar, all yesterday and all today, frantically sending us messages to do things or to get moving or to slow down or whatever had to be done. Chris Grinfield and Garesh Joshi, who you have seen in some of the presentations, acting as a moderator. Everyone's done a great job, and we want to thank them all. Also, we want to thank all of our regional coordinators. These are people who are working in each of the countries that we're focusing on. They're connecting us with people, they're connecting with people, getting the organization in place. So as soon as we can, as soon as this, the world opens up again and we can start doing what we want to do, flying areas, collecting LiDAR, organizing with local people, capacity building, doing all the things we've been talking about. And of course, besides the regional coordinators, we've got the officers of the Earth Archive, the advisory board who have been advising us on different aspects of how to get this going, on the realities of flying LiDAR, on the realities of organizing an NGO like this, a nonprofit. We've been blessed with their insights, many of whom you met yesterday. And finally, I want to thank all of the sponsors of this. These are people or groups, organizations who have donated to make this Congress a reality, who have helped us advertise to bring people into this Congress and raise awareness about the need to get open access LiDAR out there as a resource for the world to use. Just like happened a number of years ago with OpenStreetMap and with other open source data, with Landsat, with the GPS signal being declassified. That's what all of these groups have come to believe in. And we've heard from a number of them yesterday. Now let's get to some of the takeaways from day one. These are my takeaways. After this, I'm going to ask some of the others who are panelists who are on here, regional coordinators, if they've already logged in, although some of them might be taking the morning a little bit easy since they had the big day yesterday. They'll weigh in with what their takeaways were, and then Chris Fisher is going to give us a presentation of what we're looking forward to today. So first of all, Chris opened up the day with the conference themes, the big themes of communicating science, the need for open source data, the need for being able to analyze big data that is open sourced, public-private partnerships that we're hoping to realize, data security, storage, how do we do this? How do we transfer the data? The format that we hope to have eventually, all of the LiDAR data that we collect in pixels to voxels, moving from that 2D to a 3D, and ultimately in the voxel format, a 4D, where we have multiple replications of it so you get a time into it. How do we scale up from local scans, which is what airborne LiDAR is focused on now, to doing larger scans and ultimately scanning the Amazon? Those were the big conference themes from yesterday. What I took away from those, Chris, first of all, we had an introduction to the vision behind the Earth Archive. The work that then Professor William Denevan, now Emeritus Professor William Donovan, originally did back in the late 60s and 70s in the Amazon. How he uncovered originally a lot of those things that we're talking about on the cultural heritage side and a bit on the ecological side. We had, at the end of the day, Tom Lovejoy talk about the ecology of the Amazon, the need for conservation. What are his future visions of this as we move into the future? Doug Preston gave us a very interesting further background on key events that inspired Chris Fisher and myself to think about the Earth Archive and to start the ball rolling on reaching out to people to make the Earth Archive a reality and actually get those scans. Then Jason Stoker gave us a very nice overview of the US 3DEP program, which also is an inspiration for the Earth Archive. You see, it can be done, albeit in the United States, it's the government that's doing it. Although that's a federal state partnership with some private actors playing in, especially on some of the foundation sides, as there are foundations which are raising some of the money. So that's another inspiration for this. From there, we had a series of speakers who discussed the technology that grounds efforts like the Earth Archive, the collection of ground control points, the need for GPS, the GNSS systems that are up there, and how those tie into grounding LiDAR in reality. So it's not floating out there as a relative reality, but it's grounded somehow to the real world. The realities of LiDAR, the different types of sensors that are out there, how those different sensors work in collecting data. And that's one of the things that we'd like to look at in the Earth Archive, is which of those sensors or combinations of sensors are going to work best in collecting data in places like the Amazon. We've got experience from Honduras, which is somewhat analogous to the Amazon. We have experience in the LiDAR community in flying dense canopy forests, like in the northwest of the United States or out in Vancouver, British Columbia and Western Canada, where you have a temperate rainforest. But how are those sensors actually going to interact in trying to get the densest possible data we can collected in the Amazon? And also the possibility of integrating that data with other types of remotely sensed data. Next slide. Chris? Yeah. From there, we had Peter Atala, who introduced concepts of voxels and how they will be used to store the data collected by the Earth Archive. Unfortunately, I didn't catch his talk because I was over moderating in another track, in track 2. I also didn't catch Brian Kellogg's talk on the intricacies of integrating LiDAR into satellite data cubes. Both of those I have to go back and look at. And I hope that any of these that you missed, that you're interested in, you go back and look at once they're put up on the website, which will be soon. And finally, rounding out the technology for the day, we had 2 case studies that talked about other types of big data, how that has been integrated in online platforms and analyzed for modeling purposes as examples of what can be done with Earth Archive data, or types of online platforms that open source LiDAR data can be integrated into to get more out of those models. Go to the 3rd slide. A big part of yesterday was looking at LiDAR applied to the collection and protection and identification of cultural heritage, LiDAR and archaeology. This was discussed in 8 sessions. The sessions overviewed all of the countries of the Amazon basin and discussed in different ways how LiDAR from the Earth Archive can change archaeology in the region and provide a better understanding of both the past and the future. In some places, LiDAR has already been collected. And some of the presentations showed how that LiDAR was being integrated. And that gave us a vision of what could possibly be done, what can be done as we move forward with this over the next number of years. And we have to be realistic about this. This is not something that's going to happen in just a year. This is a multi-year campaign starting with small areas of interest, which are highlighted by our country collaborators as being the most important, the most threatened, the ones we should get first, and then expanding outward and putting all of those together on a platform where people can access them. We ended the day with Tom Lovejoy, who I already mentioned, but he finished up for us very nicely by looking at the current state of the Amazon, reflecting on what it was like when he first started working there and how it has changed and where conservation should go in the future, in the 21st century, how that should be integrated with sustainable development. And you can easily see that the type of data that we're proposing be collected, that we want to collect and will collect, will add to this. So those were my takeaways. What I now want to do is I want to ask Chris for his takeaways, and any of the other regional directors, regional coordinators who have logged on and want to share their takeaways. And and I'll leave it at that and let Chris go. Otherwise, I'll talk forever. I'm a professor just like Chris who can talk forever.
So I stopped sharing my slides for a minute, and I thought maybe I'll say a couple things and we'll sort of open this up. I know we have Aldo Bolaños from who's our Peruvian coordinator, Eduardo Neves, who is our Brazilian coordinator, Jim Zeidler, who's our Ecuadorian coordinator. I know Grace Ellis, who's one of our students here and who's been really helpful in organizing the conference and doing everything we need to do for the Earth Archive, is also here. And I wouldn't mind actually just hearing. I want to hear from everybody, and also and I wouldn't also Grace at some point. I wouldn't mind just getting your takeaway on sort of how this is helping you as a student and what sort of things you'd like to see done differently and stuff like that. And there's a whole bunch of other people on here. If anybody wants to say anything, so first of all, I'm always a little reluctant to talk about the Amazon because I'm not an Amazonian specialist. And in the attendee list, there's a lot of people in there that are Amazonian specialists. And so I always feel a little strange talking about it like that. But then on the other hand, sometimes maybe it's good to have a slightly different perspective on it. So hopefully what I say is not will be helpful to everybody, and of course ultimately helpful to the Earth Archive. So my takeaways, first of all, yesterday was a great overview of everything that we've been talking about for the last 2 years. Steve, how long? 2 years?
Oh,
2 years something.
I think you had this wild idea over a beer about almost 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It was after the work in the Honduras, and we were sitting after teaching one day talking about, this is a great resource, and it would be really great if it was out there for everybody. And we started talking about these possibilities. And at some point you came up with, we need an Earth Archive, as you often wave your hands all over the place and say.
Well, yeah, okay. Probably I'd had a couple Colorado beers, but that's fine. I think credit has to be given to Juan Carlos, because we also talked about this in the jungle, and Juan was also very instrumental in getting this thing off the ground. I don't know if he'll accept that phrase, but it's certainly true. So the conference yesterday and today, frankly, is really an overview of everything that we've been talking about for all of this time, and it's basically how we spent our COVID. This is what we did: is we organized this thing. It wouldn't have been possible if it hadn't been for COVID. Honestly, I mean, I know that sounds horrible, but the move to the Zoom format, being able to connect with everybody globally, it's a global endeavor. Yesterday we had people on from Europe, all over the Americas, etc. The same thing's going to happen today. We wouldn't be able to do this if it weren't for this new kind of this new culture of conferencing. For better or for worse, that's where we are. One of the most striking things to me yesterday was the amazing overview that we got on South American prehistory and conservation, Amazonian prehistory and conservation. It really was, to me, and I haven't even seen all of them. Since I was moderating the track, I didn't see any Ecuadorian stuff. I didn't see anything else. I just saw it was in my track. And even in that track, I learned so much, and there was so much information in there. It's almost like this amazing compendium of everything that's happening. And what strikes me as an outsider to the Amazon is that culturally, especially in the prehistoric period, there's as much diversity in the Amazon as there is in Mesoamerica. And people just don't seem to talk about it that way. I don't understand why. But there are as many kinds of cultural and ecological adaptations, as many different kinds of landscapes as there are in Mesoamerica. And I think that's a really profound thing to think about, especially given the fact that comparatively speaking, so little research has been done there. And the fact that we're losing it means that we need to scan it immediately, because all of that diversity is going to be gone, or a lot of it is going to be gone. And it's going to be so much harder to reconstruct it in 10 years, in 20 years. So there really is a huge need for this on any number of different levels. And I am a professor, so I'm contractually obligated to talk. So maybe I'll stop doing that now, and I'll turn it over to somebody else who might want to say something.
I can jump in from a different perspective. I'm a PhD student of Chris's. My name is Grace. And I have a lot of takeaways. I learned a lot from yesterday and saw so many great presentations. And really, it made me realize how important it is to open source this data. All the technology, it was very techno heavy. So, all of those presentations, gave me confidence that open sourcing the data is possible. But, one of the main takeaways is, how are we going to make access and usability equitable? And it's kind of, I moderated the Peru, Bolivia, Colombia session. And there were a lot of examples of how to make this data useful and integrated within local communities, and how data collection and the use of the data can be driven by local communities. And so it's really important, as a PhD student in particular, to see this reimagining of data ownership. So, the traditional model, at least from an archaeological professional perspective, is that, the professional or the PI kind of owns the data. And it's almost like these silos of data ownership. So it's really exciting to be a part of and be witness of this reimagination of data ownership, and to have something that can be open sourced and hopefully be usable to people outside of academia and local community members that actually live in these spaces and could use this 4-dimensional data in really important and meaningful ways. Another important takeaway that I have as an archaeology, aspiring archaeology professional, is that the archaeological record isn't static. So what we're documenting and finding isn't this static thing that just exists, in the pre-Columbian past. There are people that live in these spaces and use a lot and interact with these ancient anthropogenic areas in ways that we don't even know of yet, So it's just two of those main takeaways that I've really gotten just from day one. And I'm really excited what today is going to bring in terms of talking about how we're going to make this open access, but at the same time, in the back of our heads, kind of thinking about the same time of how is this going to be ethical and equitable to people, both academics and community members. So I'm really excited to talk about that and be a part of this community that's trying to reimagine this idea of data ownership.
Just to follow up on that quickly, and then I'm gonna stop talking. But the panelists from Cesium yesterday, I can't remember his name, and I'm very sorry about that. But of course, they're a sponsor and they have a booth, and you should go a lounge, and you should definitely go check that out. Which was, and it was a fascinating. His talk was fascinating, but he said something like, data is not power. Sharing the data is power, is the powerful piece of it. And I think as archaeologists, we forget that. And I think that archaeology is kind of suffering from that malady, this idea that we've got to eke out one more paper out of this data set before we release it, or I've got 5 more things I'm as guilty of that as anybody else. But I think it would be more powerful for us to open source and share this data, which is what we're trying to do with Youth Archive. So, all right, I'm not going to say anything else. Jim, Eduardo, Aldo, I know you guys have things to say. Oh, Jim, you're muted.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments following up on what you said earlier, and then some of Grace's comments. First, yeah, at least in my case for Ecuador and Amazonian Ecuador and coastal Ecuador, much like elsewhere in Amazonia, and Eduardo and Aldo can comment on this as well, it's basically going to revolutionize archaeology in these countries, just like it did in the Maya area. It's already started, really. I mean, we're finding, as all of you know, we've started finding some incredible stuff, LiDAR evidence of massive mound building areas in the Amazon of Ecuador based on some earlier LiDAR work that was done by a Russian team. It's just incredible. And all of this is just implying years and years and years of ground truthing and on the ground archaeological research to figure out what the heck's going on, because there's no chronology, that kind of thing. So that's one thing, and I'm looking forward, I'm excited about that. We need a whole new generation of archaeologists in these countries that are geospatially trained in analyzing this data. And I'll be interested to see how that transpires in Ecuador. The second thing I just want to comment on is related to what Grace was saying about the excitement of open sourcing. That's one of the challenges I see for us as regional coordinators in implementing the Earth Archive in these different countries. And I think it's going to require, at the same time that we have to do a national approach from the top down, that is governmental organizations, NGOs, academics in the big cities. I think at the very same time we're doing that, we have to start at the bottom up approach of going to local communities, starting out in places where we all work, and informing people about the nature of LiDAR data and what it can do for them in their local communities. Because if it stays at the national level, if it goes only to the national level, that's exactly where it'll stay. I don't know if there's any mechanisms for a proper trickle down, and so I think it's going to need a broad campaign of dissemination. And I'll just stop there.
If I may add some words. Hello, everybody. Aldo, you wanna talk before? I wait for you. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Eduardo. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aldo. Well, good afternoon for everyone. It's afternoon here. And I agree with everything that which has been said here, and particularly with what Jim said and what Grace said as well. I think, as you know, when Chris and Steve approached me last year, I was very excited. I'm very excited because I think LiDAR can really revolutionize what we know about the Amazonian Pass. And I think it's a powerful, it's an incredible tool. And Chris has said that before, and I agree with him. It's like radiocarbon was for archaeology. 6 years ago, LiDAR probably is going to have the same general impact and on archaeology across the board in the world. But as I've been thinking about that, and we all have been discussing a lot among ourselves, and I think it's very important, when we go ahead with this, to discuss with the local people we're going to be working with. And also, it's not only discussion in a formal way, but these people have to be, they have to take part in the decisions and in the places where we want to scan and how we're going to do it. And that's going to take a lot of time and energy. But I think this is really wonderful. It's part of our initiative here. Like, as we prepare to fly and we define some places, we may actually go ahead and, depending on the places, like go ahead and, doing the surveys, but we're going to have to spend a lot of time discussing with people on the ground and talk with, not only explaining about LiDAR, but deciding with them about the pros and cons, where to do the surveys and things like that. Because we all know that archaeology has a very, strong tradition of, center periphery relationship, and open source is a way to, have the data available to everybody. I'm afraid, and none of us want to do this, and I'm very conscious about that we reproduce again unequal relations if we don't let this technology be available to everybody and everyone who's engaged, being ourselves, but also the communities that we work with. And that's, and that's something wonderful about Amazonian archaeology, which I'm proud, part of, of being this, of this movement of people, is that most everybody who works, who does archaeology in the Amazon today is really politically engaged. We think that archaeology is not only a discourse about the past, but also about the present. And we really think that, we have to produce scientific knowledge, and we all do. And I think we're doing a good job in producing papers and writing articles. But as Chris said, we have to do something else with this, engage the people we work with, and use archaeology as a tool to actually halt the destruction of the Amazon. I think LiDAR, the way my engagement with this project is to use this data to bring another layer of protection. Since these are archaeological sites, some countries, I don't know about all countries here in South America, but here in Brazil, archaeological sites are deemed to be protected by law. They become national monuments, so that there's a whole layer of protection that can be attached to them. So by identifying those places and those archaeological sites and bringing their deep historical value, we can add another level of protection to these areas which are threatened today. So as we mentioned before, I said that a little bit yesterday. I'll try to, at least I'm talking about from the Brazilian perspective here now, try to privilege these areas which are most threatened by deforestation and illegal mining and illegal logging today, talk with the local communities, forest peoples, indigenous people, and other forest people who live there. And then I think we're going to have something very powerful, because it's producing scientific knowledge, archaeological information, which is very important, but also like moving archaeology a step forward and using it as a tool to protect and conserve the Amazon and the lifestyles of its forest peoples. I think it's wonderful if you can do this. And I think we're going towards that direction. That's going to be, I think, a parameter for other initiatives such as this elsewhere in the world. And I think, I think we're on the right track. So that's
I totally agree with that. Sorry, Aldo, I'm just going to say one thing. Because I can't help myself. I'm sorry. So, no, I totally agree with that. And I think just a couple things. We really need to build a stronger infrastructure to help the coordinators to reach out and do that. And I think that has to be one of our tasks for maybe the next few months, is figuring out a better way to do that. Of course, we're going to have a couple talks today about that, and Catherine Reese-Taylor is going to do an excellent talk on basically decolonizing LiDAR data. So this afternoon, which I actually am looking forward to. I think it's also important that we keep reaching out to those communities after we fly the LiDAR to help them understand some of the things that they can do with the LiDAR, and then also to listen to them to get a handle on what their needs are, so that there's more of a back and forth thing. And I think we all have lots of ideas about how they could potentially use those LiDAR data, but I think it's also really important for us to ask them what their needs are. Is it a land tenure battle? Is it something else? Is it just figuring out an optimal land use, or all these different things? And so, okay, I'll stop talking and I'll let Aldo go now.
No problem. You can continue. This is a matter very interesting, and also I think it's a big contribution for South American countries and Amazonian countries, no, and for the world. No, so that's why I'm here. I always I had a dream about a big archaeological map from Amazon, no, from Amazonia. For me, that's a very important project. I don't know how people can use it, no, but to have this information, I think is a basic thing. Why? Because we're thinking Amazonian like countries, isolate countries, no, and this project permit us to think in Amazonian like a unitarian environment, no, with a cultural development, no, that the countries along the history divided, no, and look like different things, no, like different parts, no. So this project can make us to permit us think in Amazonian like a unit thing, no. I think that's a very, very important thing for me. It's not a coincidence that all the countries, the Amazonian countries, have the same kind of problems, no? You know, and so that means that we need common solutions at the same time, no? So this is one of my points. The other thing is very, very briefly is that these non-invasive techniques, no, to register archaeological sites, no, permit us to have more sostenibles in Spanish. Sorry. And programs, no. You know, archaeologists never think about our impacts in the environment, no? And we have a lot of impacts. So I think this is a very important ethic also matter to discuss. How we need how we can investigate Amazonian, no, reducing our impacts. Another thing that I think is important, that this project, Earth Archive, have to make our governments to think about this, no, and to become aware of the needs of the open data, you know, to solve the problems, you know, the common problems of Amazony for everybody. From Peru, I think also this is important because possible like in Ecuador, like in Colombia, not in Brazil because they have Eduardo Neves there, but in my country, Amazonian is we don't know nothing about archaeological sites of Amazonia. We know very, very, very little things. So we can increase our knowledge about Amazonian with this project. And to finish, I think open data is power for the people, and that's why it's a very sensitive problem or matter. No, so the ethical matters of this have to be discussed and have to be need have a very fine discussion to not affect the different sectors of society, no, that can have opposite interest about this, no. But open data, yes, I know, is power for the people, and I like that. That's it.
And related to the question of open data and access, et cetera, and something that I think maybe we do need to tell people about, because I've gotten this a couple of times, and there's a question in the chat from Umberto Lombardo about uncontacted peoples and what we're going to do about uncontacted peoples. And this is something that we've talked about this many different times, and we're completely sensitive to that issue of uncontacted peoples. And for everybody's sort of basic knowledge, the Amazon is one of the last places on the earth where there are uncontacted peoples. And they're uncontacted because that is their desire. And of course, we will honor that. And so there are some methodologies that we can use to ghost out or hide those areas in the data. The 3DEP program in the United States, actually, Jason Stoker, who spoke yesterday about 3DEP, is the expert in ghosting out sacred sites and sensitive sites, working with First Nations or Native American groups in North America to identify those places. And then there are some technologies and techniques that are used. I don't know what they are, Jason does, but they're used to, maybe Steve does, but they're used to ghost out the data so you can't see where those locations are. And we will have to do something similar, but we are very sensitive to that idea of sacred sites, sacred places, uncontacted peoples, and exposing those areas in the data. And we'll work to keep those places under wraps, I guess, as per the wishes of the country, and working with the regional coordinators and stuff like that. And we need to end at probably 10:10, so I have 5 minutes or so to introduce today's session. So we have, I think, about four more minutes of discussion or so. Does that sound right, Steve?
Yeah, that sounds right. And I'd like to just add to what you just said that, the question of dealing with imaging, high resolution imaging of people who are uncontacted or in very remote places is something that's been discussed a lot. It's also something the remote sensing community has not done a really good job in dealing with in the past, and we're trying to avoid those. And there have been airborne, just traditional photogrammetric surveys that have flown over areas of uncontacted people and never even thought about it. There's high resolution imagery from space, which images those areas all the time and never tries to do anything to decrease the potential harm that's done to those areas. We want to deal with that and think about it beforehand and put protocols in beforehand before this is done. We're trying to avoid those mistakes of the past. I just wanted to add that in. So Chris, do you want to go ahead with the next section? You're muted, Chris.
It's like the buzzword.
May I add something very quickly here?
Oh yeah, of course.
Sure. Yep, go ahead.
I'll have to leave and get my shots, which is, it's a big thing here in Brazil, getting vaccinated. But I just want to, we kind of have a rough idea where uncontacted people are in the Amazon, very roughly. And there are some hotspots areas. I work in one of those areas in Rondônia near Bolivia. And it's people know there's actually a legal reservation in this case. I think we have to avoid these places in the first. And again, talk with the people on the ground. I think before we fly, we have to find a way to talk with the people. And I think what's interesting is that a lot of indigenous people are buying the message of archaeology, which is the idea that the Amazon, building up on Bill Donovan's immense contribution. Now, these are cultural landscapes created by forest people over the millennia. So they see the archaeological heritage also as cultural heritage, something that needs to be protected. I think that's the message. Archaeology has been saying that in the Amazon for over 20 years. And I think, that's the message that we have to bring to the people. And I can see, local communities feeling engaged with that because they see the value and the power that archaeology has for their political claims. Thank you.
I think you should probably move on, Steve. So I have just time for kind of a introduction, do some housekeeping introduction to today's sessions. And thank you very much, you guys, for participating. And of course, thank you so much to you and all the rest of the regional coordinators for all the hard work that you've done. I mean, we wouldn't be where we're at. This wouldn't be possible if it weren't for your continued support and hard work. And you know, we're so appreciative of that. So thank you again to all of the regional coordinators. And with that, I'll share my screen again. And did you want to say something, Steve?
I just wanted to reiterate what you said and thank everybody for all the work that's gone into this.
Yeah.
So I'll let Chris take over now.
So I'll do the introduction tomorrow. So I'm going to share my screen today here. We had a bit of an emergency this morning at very early. Steve Coast, who is going to speak today about OpenStreetMaps, actually, even though he was vaccinated, and there's a cautionary tale here, I think. Even though he's vaccinated, has come down with a horrible case of COVID, and we all think that he's going to be okay, but he obviously can't. He obviously can't speak. So the optimum solution for us was to replay some content from yesterday, which is Doug Preston's talk. So we're going to play Doug Preston's talk in place of Steve Coast's presentation on OpenStreetMaps. It's a major bummer. We all hope that Steve is going to be okay. And again, it's a command performance of me waving my arms around like a complete idiot in a bright orange rain jacket. So I want to remind you that we have two really major Amazonian keynotes today. The first is at 10, Susanna Hecht, who I've actually known for a long time,
ages,
believe it or not. We'll discuss concepts of, we'll talk about Amazonia and with a provocative talk called The Last Unfinished Page of Genesis. And of course, Mark Plotkin. This is going to be Mark Plotkin's a great speaker. This is going to be a really great talk. He's going to talk at 12:30 Pacific time. And his talk will follow on the heels of the publication of his excellent book by the same name, which is perfect for graduate and undergraduate classes, believe it or not. And it's called The Amazon, What Everybody Needs to Know. There'll be 2 additional sessions on the Amazon today. Tasso Azevedo is going to talk about the Map Biomass project at 10:45, which is a big mapping project for the Amazon. And we're working very closely with them, and we'll plug our data into their database if we can. And then at 1:30, Carlos Fausto is going to discuss the importance of indigenous knowledge and working with indigenous people, which will follow on the heels of our conversation that we had, the excellent conversation we just had this morning. We have those every week, honestly, and it's such fun. We try to have those every Friday or every other Friday, get all the regional coordinators together and talk about these kinds of issues. And they're just an absolute blast. I really look forward to those every other week. And then last but not least, Andre Franco is going to take the scale, move it downward a little bit, and he's going to discuss Amazonian soil biomes at 11:30. If the Earth Archive is going to work and we're going to be successful, we have to work together with industry, and Garesh will be hosting a fireside chat today, which promises to be super good, with representatives from ESRI, the WGIC, OGC, and GEO at 10:45. These are major mapping organizations for the geospatial industry. And then we'll have several other talks from people from industry about how industry and science can work together. Will Sarney, who's an advisory board member, will talk from the Water Foundry. We'll talk today about issues of water scarcity and conservation. And I hope he talks about little bit about what's happening in the Colorado Basin, which has dominated the news cycle, the massive drought that we're experiencing in the Western U.S. and the implications of that drought for water for much of the Mountain West. Communicating science is something that we've really focused on in the Earth Archive, and Helena Bowen at 3:30 will talk about, who's a TED coach, speechwriter, science communication expert, and my friend, though she probably cringes when I say that, we'll be talking about how to produce compelling science communication in today's world of disinformation. I hope everybody really tunes into this because it's so important that we hone our message as scientists, archaeologists, industry people, etc. And Helena is an expert at doing that. And then our final keynote will be from Keith Mosbach on geospatial intelligence and how that can help the future of the planet. And then, of course, we also have Bob Hansen from MAPS, who will be speaking at 3 today on technology enablers and collectors of LiDAR data for the Earth. So how do you remain engaged with the Earth Archive? And there's several methodologies. Contact us. You can contact us via the website, on LinkedIn. We would love to have your donation, and there's a place for you to do that. There's a lounge for you to do that. Please visit our sponsor lounges. Please visit the speaker lounges. Remember that there will be a prize for visiting those lounges today. And we are planning upcoming Earth Archive events. These will be small seminars on a whole host of topics that most of which we touched on today, but it'll be deep dives into those things. If there's a topic that you'd like to see, let us know. Reach out to us. Everybody's available on LinkedIn, via the website, etc.